Okay, colleagues, I would like to welcome you all to this brown paper bag event. My name is Parfait Kasongo, and I am the Communications and Learnings Coordinator for Twende Mbele. Thank you for being with us, and I hope that today's conversations will be informative to you all. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of communicating on evaluations to increase demand. And the lessons, or rather the speaker for today, will come from IDEV. So we'll be touching on some of the experiences that IDEV has. We hope that today's speaker will be able to provide insights from the knowledge sharing and dissemination experiences to provide rich and more specific directions on communicating and sharing around evaluations. The speaker for today is Ms. Jane Musumba. She is the acting manager with the Independent Development Evaluations at the African Development Bank Group. She leads a team of knowledge management, outreach, capacity, and capacity development. She has extensive experience in public policy, sustainable development, knowledge management, and innovations. Before she worked for the bank, she was a knowledge management specialist with the UNDP. She has also worked in sustainable development officer at the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs. Jane holds a Master's of Science in Management from the New York University and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the Hunters College and the City University of New York. She is also an alumnus of the Executive Program in Behavioral Science, Program Management, Design and Innovations from Harvard Kennedy School and the Parsons School of Design. Fun fact, this year, Publish What You Want Fund, the global campaign for aid and development transparency, named the African Development Bank for the most transparent organization in the world, beating the World Bank and others. So we are in good hands. Just a quick housekeeping, colleagues, if you just remain muted at all times, if you'd kindly, we'll have a question and answer session after Ms. Musumba has presented. So if you'd kindly just type your questions in the chat box and I will get to them after Ms. Musumba has presented. Ms. Musumba, please do go ahead and start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Parfait, for the beautiful introduction. So I do have control. I can share my screen now, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, just give me one sec. So Parfait, can you give me a thumbs up if you're able to see my presentation?
I can see your presentation.
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share the IDEV experience on knowledge management and communications. It also allows me to reflect actually on this experience. Just having difficulties moving this. Okay. So given that I have a short time allocation, I will focus my presentation today on 6 areas. I will start with a brief background of the independent development evaluation. at the African Development Bank. I'll also give you the rationale for a combined knowledge management and communications approach. We'll also talk about KM and communications in the evaluation process, KM and communications platforms and tools, products and activities, and I'll finish with the presenting on measuring evaluation knowledge use. I'm sure many of you have had interactions with IDEV at the African Development Bank since we are a member of Twende Mbele initiative. But just to give you a quick background for those of you who are not familiar with IDEV at the African Development Bank. So our primary role is to enhance the development effectiveness of the bank group through four main functions. First is to conduct independent evaluations of the bank's ongoing or completed policies, strategies, and operations at any aspect that impacts on the development effectiveness of the bank's assistance. Second, we assess and help to improve the bank self-evaluation processes and products, such as the implementation progress reports, the midterm reviews, the completion reports. We also proactively facilitate the feedback of findings, lessons, and recommendations from the assessments, the evaluations, to the board, bank management, and bank staff, and also the various stakeholders in the regional member countries, which actually in this presentation, I'll be referring to them as RMCs. So finally, we also assist RMCs in strengthening monitoring and evaluation capacity and systems. So all of IDEV's activities, oh, I hear some background noise. Oops.
Jane, you are muted. Do you just want to mute yourself, please?
Okay.
I do apologize for that. Thank you.
It's okay. Thank you, Parfait. So all of IDEV's activities are designed to meet the following three strategic objectives. First is to provide a basis for accountability to key stakeholders. So this is including citizens, governments, funders, partners, by evaluating and documenting the impact of banks' activities. It is also to contribute to enhanced learning, so helping to improve the current and future policies, strategies, and processes of the bank. And finally is to promote an evaluation culture, so both within the bank and with our regional member countries, to encourage a process of continuous learning and improvement. As many of you may know, IDEV actually has a wealth of experience, expertise, and knowledge from evaluating the bank's development interventions across Africa. So just to be on the same page, I want to clarify on what we mean by development effectiveness. What does it really mean? Here we are looking at the design, implementations, and results of the interventions. So this will be the policies, the strategies, and operations. It will also be gathering of evidence about what works, what does not, and why. And also it's about evaluating the intervention using the standard criteria for development evaluation as defined by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Assistance, OECD DAC. So this is the IDEV structure. All divisions report to the Evaluator General, who is actually in the audience today. Karen, she'll say maybe hello at the end of the presentation. So IDEV 1 and IDEV 2 divisions are responsible for undertaking independent evaluations of the bank group activities in the designated operational areas. Let me just switch off my camera because I'm having issues with that one. Perfect, just give me 1 sec.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, now it's good.
All right.
Sorry about that. So while the IDEV 3 is responsible for knowledge management, outreach, and strengthening capacity development with our regional member countries. IDEV is guided by the bank's independent evaluation policy and the 3-year rolling work program. So for 2022-2024 work program, it has been designed to focus more strongly on the utility and use of evaluations, and also on knowledge sharing and engagement with stakeholders. The work program is also well aligned with the bank's 10-year strategy and the high fives. These are the 5 development priorities of the bank. The work program also responds to the needs of the key stakeholders and potential users. So the rationale for knowledge management and communications is as following. First, to foster learning from evaluations, so ensuring evaluative knowledge is valued, utilized, and contributes to improving development effectiveness. Second is by publishing and disseminating all evaluations, actually we contribute to accountability to beneficiaries, stakeholders, the co-financiers and partners by documenting the performance of the bank's intervention. So again, just to clarify here what we mean by evaluation knowledge. In IDEV, evaluation knowledge means knowledge gained from an evaluation process. So it highlights what works, what does not, why, for whom, and also under what circumstances. So to manage all evaluation knowledge produced by IDEV in timely and effective manner that meets the knowledge needs of the key stakeholders, a combined approach on knowledge management and communications is utilized, and actually for the following reasons. It supports the use of communications, mechanisms to facilitate the delivery of evaluative knowledge. It also supports the use of communications and KM processes to improve the quality of evaluative evidence and generate demand and facilitate use of evaluation. And finally, it does enhance stakeholder engagement during the evaluation process and beyond. In the evaluation process at IDEV, the KM and communications activities can be summarized in the following areas. So you have the KM and the communications team supports the stakeholder mapping and knowledge needs assessment. So with this exercise actually is conducted early in the evaluation so that the steps can be taken to effectively manage the interest and expectations of the various stakeholders throughout the evaluation. Here, a stakeholder is any person or group or organization who has an interest in the results of that evaluation. So even including the evaluator. The information contained in the needs assessment also helps us and the evaluation team engage stakeholders and support the planning and the development of an appropriate dissemination plan to meet the needs, the knowledge needs of the stakeholder. It is also important to engage with the stakeholders throughout the evaluation process in order to create ownership and also actually to reduce conflicts on processes, findings, and recommendations. Second, the team also reviews evaluation concept notes, approach, or the inception papers, technical reports, summary reports. In reviewing, mainly we do a lot of editing of these reports. We also prepare and implement dissemination plans. We manage KM and communications products and organize outreach and dissemination activities. Also, we do foster learning from evaluations. So here we organize learning events such as capitalization workshops. The objective of this workshop is for evaluation that is focused on learning. So it doesn't contain recommendations. These will be evaluations like the cluster and synthesis evaluations. So IDEV, together with the relevant operations departments of the bank, will organize this workshop to discuss the findings of the evaluation, and mainly to facilitate the learning and the uptake of the lessons by the operations colleagues. So for this experience, actually, it has been positive. So we will be organizing more of these capitalization workshops. We also organize other knowledge sharing events, conferences, and webinars. So to help the bank draw greater learning from its experience, IDEV has a suite of knowledge and communications products developed from each evaluation, addressing the knowledge needs of the target audiences. For communications tools, we use email announcements. We also use blogs, interviews, videos, our publications, which includes the evaluation reports, highlights, brief, the evaluation matters, and also the annual report. For communications channels, we use our public website, the database, internal and external newsletter. We also use media outreach, social media, multimedia, and also the publication, not only as a tool, but also as a channel. And finally, events. To enhance learning from evaluations, we undertake KM dissemination and outreach activities that strategically planned and sequenced in order to optimize the use of evaluation findings. So first of all, we engage with the stakeholders of an evaluation throughout the evaluation process, as I mentioned earlier, to get their feedback and buy-in. In line with the principle of transparency, we also publish and disseminate evaluation reports and knowledge products such as briefs, lessons notes online on our website, also through social media, through mailings, and also the print copies. We also produce a monthly newsletter and a quarterly magazine, Evaluation Matters, which actually some of you have also contributed to the magazine in the past. We capture all evaluation findings, lessons, and recommendations in the evaluation results database, EVRD, which is publicly accessible. And also, as mentioned earlier, we organize learning events like workshops, the annual evaluation week, which will be taking place actually end of next month, September, on the 20th to the 30th of September. It will be a virtual event, and I hope to see many of you. So actually the registration has started. So yeah, if you can get on the registration as soon as possible. IDEV collaborates with various stakeholders, the national, regional, and global levels to promote both the supply of and demand for evaluations. So making sure the contextual factors of each regional member country are taken into consideration to achieve their optimal impact. So such collaboration seeks to learn from partners' proven approaches, and also aims to better harmonize evaluation objectives, procedures, and practices. So internally, IDEV undertakes evaluation capacity development efforts aimed at enhancing and advancing a culture of evaluation in the banks by engaging stakeholders throughout the cycle of each evaluation, by raising the quality of self-evaluation through the project completion reports and the expanded supervision reports validation, also by sharing lessons from evaluations and ensuring they're applied. We also do this by supporting staff capacity through knowledge and skill development, and supporting actually the evaluability of bank interventions through early engagement. IDEV also continues to strengthen the capacity of its own staff, and other bank staff via targeted trainings, webinars, and learning events on a variety of evaluation methodologies and practices. Externally, IDEV contributes to both the supply and demand sides of evaluations in RMCs through initiatives such as the African Parliamentarian Network on Development Evaluation UpNode, evaluation platform for regional African development institutions, IPRADI, Eval Partners, and you, Twende Mbele, the CLEAR initiative, both Anglophone and Francophone, and many others. So in measuring evaluation knowledge use, just to start off, last year we produced 13 products. These included 10 evaluations, 1 synthesis report, 2 reports of the Management Action Record System. The acronym is MAS. So this was for the 2020 and the 2021 reports. Also, IDEV continued to assist the board of directors to keep track of the implementation of evaluation recommendations through MAS. So this actually strengthens the corporate accountability and assists the board in its oversight role. So how do we know we were successful with our dissemination activities? Did the dissemination reach the intended audience? What is the evidence on how many people it reached? For this, we use mixed methods in measuring evaluation knowledge. For the qualitative method, we use surveys such as the IDEV Client Satisfaction Survey. Also, from all our learning events, we also have surveys. We also conduct after action reviews. This is a quick reflective exercise for team-based learning. So during a project or ongoing initiative, just in order to improve the results in the current project or initiative. For the quantitative method, we use email analytics, Google Analytics, social media impact. We have a Twitter account for that. Video analytics, we have a YouTube channel. So also monitoring the conversation rate on social network spaces and the rate of search and download in our evaluation results database, MAS, and also the EVRD and MAS. On this slide, I may have gone a little bit overboard. I got too excited to share with you the IDEV evaluations that have been influential. But in our 2021 annual report, you can find all these highlights and many more in how our evaluations have actually contributed to development effectiveness and evidence-based decision-making. I just wish to highlight a few. Here I've listed 10, but let me just mention maybe 3 of them. In regard to revisiting approaches to assessing additionality and development outcome, the bank's second additionality and development outcomes assessment, ADOA framework, which was approved in 2015, is a decision-making tool to improve project design and selectivity of the bank's non-sovereign operations. So the bank is in the process of revising that framework, which has been informed by IDEV's evaluation of ADOA Framework 2.0. On informing the bank's third fragility strategy in 2021, last year, the bank continued its development of a new 5-year strategy for addressing fragility and building resilience in Africa. So this has been informed actually by 2 evaluations. IDEV's 2020 evaluation of the bank's fragility strategy for the period of 2014 to 2019, and another IDEV's evaluation on the bank's transition support facility over the same period of 2014 to 2019. And finally, on climate change and green growth, the bank launched its new climate change and green growth framework 2021 to 2030. at the COP26 conference in November of last year. Just to highlight that this was the first of its kind by any multilateral development bank. So the strategic framework articulates how the bank will work with the African countries to address the climate change and promote green growth on the continent. It comprises a policy designed to enhance the bank's capacity to drive green, inclusive, sustainable, and climate compatible growth. This is a long-term strategy to prioritize interventions and a 5-year action plan. So all these actually were informed by IDEV evaluation of mainstreaming green growth and climate change into the bank's intervention, and also the project cluster evaluation, which covered the energy and transport sectors. So this brings me to the end of the presentation. I'm available to provide clarification if needed. But once again, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share our experience and making the time for it. Thanks. Back to you, Parfait.
Thank you very much, Jane. Colleagues, I only see the one question. I'm not sure if everybody else are just convinced or happy with the presentation, but yeah, feel free to put your questions in there, Jane. So I will pose you this question here, and the question goes as follows. How do you balance between increased evaluation demand and limited budgets for conducting evaluations? And that's the first question. And then a question for myself, as we are speaking to government employees or government officials in this learning event. And from your experience working with government, what are some of the basic measures or basic things that government can put in place to better communicate and to improve learning, or to share the learnings coming out of some of the evaluations that they do and some of the work that they do? Thank you.
Okay. First of all, let me just, as I mentioned earlier, we have our evaluator general also in the audience.
Yes.
And also another colleague of mine, Jacqueline Nyagahima, also another IDEV colleague participating here. So they can feel free to jump in the Q&A.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but thank you so much. The first question in terms of the increased demand for evaluation and budget. As I mentioned earlier, we have a 3-year rolling work program. And this work program actually is developed based on extensive consultation with the various bank units, so departments and units, and also our various stakeholders. So they provide input in identifying the I would say evaluative knowledge gaps that need to be addressed for the period of the work program, which is the 3 years. And once that list has been developed in terms of the evaluative knowledge that is needed in moving development effectiveness within the bank and with its regional member countries, that consultation is actually brought back to our board of directors, who also, in consultation with IDEV, they work through the process of prioritizing which evaluations for each given year. Of course, it's based on recommendation that is coming also from IDEV. In a given year, I know for 2021, I listed, we had 13 products, but in a given year, actually, we do produce an average of 15 products, and it's a mix of the types of evaluations and other products. So for example, the MAS report, which is the management action report system. We also have other products in terms of the validation of the self-evaluations of the bank processes also. all these products, there's a budget to it. So in giving an example, maybe to our government colleagues, so we have the 3-year program that has been approved. We have a budget that supports the implementation of that work program. I don't know if there's a follow-up question from that response.
Thank you. I think I would like to bring in the Madam Secretary. Karen, is there anything you'd like to add? Or Jacqueline, is it? Your other colleague from IDEV. Are there anything you guys would like to add to that?
Yes, Parfait. Just to say that, as Jane mentioned, we do have a wide stakeholder consultations, which leads to quite a long list of evaluations that are being requested. And then we apply a prioritization process using criteria. So we apply criteria such as timeliness, the timeliness of the evaluation for its contribution to be useful, primary stakeholder interest, the level of interest that was expressed by the stakeholders, strong interest, medium interest, low interest, materiality, which is the extent of the relevance or the significance of the area of intervention, and finally the alignment with bank priorities. So we do apply these prioritization criteria to bring down the list of potential evaluations, because for our 2022-2024 work program, we had a potential list of about 100 evaluations, which we had to bring down to about 36, because we can start about 12 evaluations each year. And so by applying these criteria, that's how we brought down the list, and that's how we reconcile the demand with the available budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And our next question, just pull this up.
So the next question was in terms of the basic measures to share the evaluative knowledge, was it?
Yes.
Okay.
Like
so,
what are some of the basic things that countries can do, with the limited resources, perhaps that they may be allocating to knowledge sharing and knowledge management and communications? Yeah.
Well, it's actually it's how the evaluation knowledge is perceived in the respective entities, whether it's at the ministry level, or even with the civil societies and so forth. With some of the government ministries, actually they do have units that are focused on monitoring and evaluation. So with us, given the experience that we do have, as I showed the structure of the 3 divisions that we have, and 1 division is just purely focused on KM outreach and evaluation capacity development. That is not the structure that is expected in many of government counterparts. But however, given the many evaluations that are being undertaken by governments or commissioned by governments, there is a budget usually that is assigned to it. So it's just an issue of also committing, first of all, there will be a budget that will be allocated to the work that is related to knowledge management or knowledge and outreach, or even evaluation capacity development, because as I kept on saying in the presentation, in the whole evaluation process cycle, there's learning that is happening. There's continuous engagement that is needed with the various stakeholders. So that has to be budgeted in. It's very difficult to say that you're just going to do KM and outreach as an afterthought. It's going to be very difficult to do that. In ourselves, it has been trial and error in where we are right now in regard to with KM and communications processes, I would say. But now the KM and communications activities have really, or the processes have really matured. That is not expected also at the government level. So you have to start with something. I would say some of the high level evaluations that the government has commissioned, start with that. And then you build the need of having maybe a team that is purely focused on doing this particular work, because it takes quite a bit of work.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I could chip in on this for
Yes.
governments, what they could do. What I'm aware of is that right now in Africa, a lot of government ministries do have a website, and they are also available on various social media platforms. So for a starting point, they already have some at least basic communication channel. That's one communication channel. Another communication channel that governments normally have is they do bring together different ministries. They have, I think, gatherings where they bring in representatives from the different ministries to talk, maybe to speak about the work plans that they have, or to present some kind of paper or policy that they're doing. But at that fora, you do have many people there, and knowledge experts can actually try and piggyback on such events to actually spread their knowledge. Now those are the tools, the channels. Now we come to the tools. Let's say you have an evaluation that you have carried out, and it is one high-level evaluation. I think that also with governments, normally they'll have at least one or two communication or information officers attached to a ministry. And yes, as Jane said, preparing such products is quite resource intensive. You need money for it, but it's because with IDEV, we do have a wide range of products that we produce, but a government official or ministry can decide that they'll only have one product. Maybe when you have your evaluation report, have a very good executive summary that you will say, this is the product that we are going to identify, or you might say, we shall have a brief. We shall just come up with one brief for each evaluation that we do. And that can be done by anybody sitting with a desktop publisher in their office. Your information person or your communication expert can do this. And so if you do have that one product, you have to try and make sure that all these evaluations that you conduct, first of all, are placed on your websites. Because what I have realized is many government ministries, their websites are really, really lacking in terms of information. So you already have information that you can put up there. And then the small product that you have, a small flyer that you produce, which you can also share via these various social media platforms that you can use. And as we say, when you do have these gatherings of government officials, make sure you have at least someone in the higher level, present your evaluation, prepare a good presentation for them, and they can present it. So it's just using whatever, as we say, channels that you have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There are a few questions in the chat. Jane, I don't know if you want to split it with your colleagues, or do we still go as it is? I'm referring to the question by Adrian Harris. How do you ensure a strong presence during project inceptions? I have found that this is often an afterthought. And then there is a question by David Waga. What is IDEV's working arrangements with institutions responsible for evaluations in countries where you have worked? For example, I note that an impact evaluations of the last mile connectivity in Kenya was conducted, and I am not sure if the State Department responsible for evaluations participated as a key stakeholder in evaluations. And obviously, Isabella's question has been answered too. Thank you very much, Karen. How do you handle, this is a question from Knox, how do you handle tricky recommendations in communication efforts? Sometimes we find it difficult to disseminate what other stakeholders may deem unsavory, which then even delays releasing reports. Or do you mitigate for this early on in the process? Any other questions?
That's quite a bit
yeah.
to remember.
Okay. So I think let's
so
yeah.
Actually the one on the last mile connectivity project, Jackie can pick on that because actually she's the KM officer for that particular evaluation. Jackie, you want to come on?
Yeah, maybe I can do this. For this last mile connectivity project, One thing I do recall is that at the start of the evaluation, there's that concept note and the inception meeting report that we come out with. And I think at the point when they have the inception report is we do have, sorry, let me just go backwards. We do have, first of all, the stakeholder mapping that we carry out for each evaluation. And so at the point that the evaluation is taking place, it was more to ask questions with the beneficiary organization, the beneficiaries on the ground, and find out how they benefited, let's say, from this particular intervention. So the evaluation was carried out and we have the report out. Now, what we're at the stage of doing right now, we have dissemination events around this particular evaluation. So we actually have going to carry out a stakeholder event, knowledge sharing event in Kenya. At some time we're planning it with the regional office in Kenya to disseminate the evaluation findings to stakeholders in Kenya. So I'm actually glad to see that someone is asking on this platform, because I do recall that we are going to invite the officials from the Ministry of the State Department responsible for monitoring and evaluation, and the Ministry of State for Planning. Those are among the stakeholders we're going to invite. So it will happen sometime this year. And I think I saw a message, I think the message came in from someone called Isabel Kiplagat. I was actually trying to ask you to send me your email, because we would then invite you for this dissemination event. But at the start, the interest is in terms, the stakeholders that are involved at the start are really the stakeholders that are implementing that particular project at that point. That was the KPLC, that would be the Ministry of Energy, and that would be, again, the bank officials within the country. And then when they went out into the field, that was again carried out and was carried out through consultants who went into the field. And it was carried out at the time when there was a lockdown. If I remember very well, the consultancies were carried out during that period of the COVID, when there was not much, what would I say? There was not much movement around in Kenya, but that evaluation it was possible to do that. So even the stakeholders who were interviewed in Kenya were interviewed, most of them were interviewed virtually, for those who are working, who are in the ministries and who are in the implementing organizations. It was the surveyors who went into the field, into the different counties in the field, that now met and interacted with the beneficiaries on the ground. So that's what I could say for the last mile connectivity. And as I said, please do get in touch. We are organizing something for stakeholders in Kenya.
Well, thank you very much for that, Jacqueline. Just to inform you that yes, indeed, Isabella and Eloise are both part of the M&E unit or department in Kenya. So they will definitely be the right people to speak to with regards to that. And they'll definitely be reaching out. Karen, I think I would like to bring this question to you from Knox. And how do you handle tricky recommendations in your communications efforts? Sometimes we find them to be difficult to disseminate what other stakeholders may deem to be unsavory. Obviously, you've been with the bank for a very long time. Is this a tricky thing for you? Do you find, Karen?
Perfect. Before she answers,
Yes.
I meant to say findings and recommendations, not just tricky recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I would say that, one advantage of being independent is that we can publish and disseminate what we want. We are not constrained by the management side of the bank in publishing, right? I am the final authority who decides what gets submitted to the AFDB Board of Directors and what is published on our website, and that is laid down in the independent evaluation policy. So we don't need to get the agreement of the, let's say, the evaluand in order to publish our findings or our recommendations. Of course, we do have the process of the evaluation reference group in which the management and operational side of the bank is represented, and they review every evaluation product, whether it be the approach paper or the technical report or the summary report. So they can provide feedback at every step of the process. We decide which feedback we take on board. In terms of the recommendations, we do try and ensure that they are useful to the bank and that they are feasible and that they are implementable. And so we do have an additional meeting usually on the recommendations that should flow forth from the evaluation. We try to limit the number of recommendations. We try to make sure that the recommendations are, let's say, at a slightly higher level. We try not to be too prescriptive. So we pinpoint what the issue is or the issues that were identified by the evaluation, but we leave it up to management to decide how to address the issues. So we don't try and tell management how to do their job. And this works really quite well. Don't forget that every evaluation which has recommendations and which is presented to the board of directors is accompanied by a management response. And so in that response, management is free to put all of its comments or any disagreements with the findings or the recommendations and to indicate how they're going to implement the recommendations. Management is required to draw up an action plan with concrete actions and timelines. But through this process of constructive engagement throughout the evaluation process and having a separate discussion on the recommendations, we find that management largely agrees with the recommendations and then develops action plans to implement them. And then there really is no issue with publishing the full report, disseminating it, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Parfait, just maybe to add on the last point that Karen mentioned in regard to that the stakeholder engagement throughout the evaluation cycle. For the last 2 years, I would say, or the last 3 years, IDEV has really strengthened the KM and outreach and evaluation capacity development team. So there's a strong element on stakeholder engagement, which we provide to the various evaluation teams. As Karen mentioned, the processes that we have in place, for example, the evaluation reference group. So by the time the findings and the lessons and recommendations, when they come to the board, it's not really a surprise to the various stakeholders because they have been in the loop throughout the whole evaluation cycle.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I think we are fast running out of time. There is a question here from Limpo. I hope I pronounced it correctly. What would you say is the relationship between KM and evaluations, and what are the challenges that you experience between the two fields? That question is for you, Jane, and obviously the work that you do at IDEV.
It's maybe the question of a means to an end, probably. So as I mentioned earlier, in regard to the evaluation knowledge, here, here in IDEV, as I said, basically is collecting or identifying the knowledge from the evaluation process. So really looking at what worked, what does not work, why, for whom, and under what circumstances. This is not a surprise, when doing an evaluation, the process looks similar also in terms of when we do KM, so we are collecting, we are codifying, and in the end, we want to share those findings. So the strength that KM or communications brings into the evaluation process, as I said, is facilitating the delivery of the evaluative knowledge. And also just being able to have an effective way or improving the quality of the evaluation evidence that is being collected. And in the end, what is most important, using KM or communications really to enhance that engagement that is needed with the stakeholders in the evaluation process and beyond. So While the evaluation is ongoing, the KM processes actually kick in from the inception. So we don't separate the two in seeing how we meet the end goal, which is having that evaluative knowledge. I don't know if Jackie wants to add on or Karen.
I think you've actually said it all.
Okay, I think that's where I would like to leave it. And I think the biggest takeaway from me actually is, or what I learned from you today, Jane, is that actually communications and KM actually is built into the processes of evaluations that's all the activities that IDEV undertakes to do. And I think for me that is one could say is the biggest difference between what we see from our government partners and what IDEV actually does. And this is definitely something we'll have to look at improving as government partners in our respective countries. I would like to thank you, Jane, for taking part, or rather for presenting, for such a wonderful presentation. I would like to thank also Jacqueline and Karen for also the inputs, and colleagues for those who were able to pose those questions. I thank you for that. For the questions that we have not been able to answer, what we will do is harvest those questions, get Jane, Jacqueline, and Karen to answer them separately, and we will email you those answers. Thank you so much, colleagues, for taking part in this discussion. You guys, you have yourselves a wonderful afternoon and evening, and we'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.
Okay, perfect. Just quickly,
Yes.
there was a question about the presentation. I will share that with you, and then you can share with the audience.
Sounds good. Absolutely. There will also be a presentation and a video that will also be shared. Thank you very much, colleagues. Have yourselves a wonderful afternoon and evening. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.